Hey everybody, happy Friday. This week I want to talk about a mistake to avoid if you're a behavior analyst. And it's something I think we we don't necessarily have on our radar. It's usually a blind spot for us. But I want to talk about um, looking at things excessively through a univariate lens versus a multivariate lens. Looking at making things too simple sometimes when we need to be looking at things from a multiple, things are more complex and everything. Now, that doesn't mean we need to overcomplicate things, but there is a general pattern to diagnosing and assessing and fixing a situation. And for most of us, we're in a center-based setting or a home-based setting. We're in the field, we're practicing ABA, and it's just, to be perfectly honest with you, it's more complicated than working with kids in maybe a more controlled environment like a experimental lab or a university setting, because we can't control all the variables like maybe an academic researcher can. What we're working with are a lot of different kinds of curveballs, and basically what I'm saying today is that BCBAs need to challenge themselves to consider multiple curveballs as opposed to oversimplifying things. And so I'm going to start with an example from the medical field. Let's say there's a particular individual, this guy, and he's got like this chronic fatigue. He just feels washed out. He's got he's experienced some headaches and things like that. He's just tired all the time. So he goes to his doctor. Doctor runs some tests and notices a vitamin D deficiency, and says, and prescribes, so many capsules or a certain dosage of vitamin D, to help him out. So the doc notices the vitamin D deficiency. When he runs the test and gives him vitamin D, it says take vitamin D. So the guy leaves and starts taking the dosages the way he's supposed to, but he notices after a couple of weeks nothing really changes, and he goes back. And the doctor really starts to ask questions and starts to realize that this particular individual maybe is unemployed, and they maybe play a lot of engage in a lot of screen time, maybe a lot of video games, a lot of movie watching, things like that. This particular individual doesn't leave the house much, and in fact prefers to stay in their bedroom, or keep the shades drawn, things like that. This particular person, because they're not leaving their house, is not engaging socially in a physical sense with anybody on the exterior of their home. They are also not getting out and moving. Not only are they not working out, they're also just not walking. They're not walking to the car as much as maybe a regular person would. They're sitting more, doing things like that. There's a lot going on. And then he digs a little bit deeper and he realizes this person was maybe bullied as a child, or has some kind of family trauma, where the adults maybe didn't completely have it together in terms of caring for him. And so as a result, this challenged a lot of the development of his social relationships, and maybe pushed him to seek out only safer environments, no environments, that challenged him, especially challenging him socially. Uh, so, so this is an interesting development, because this goes a lot deeper than just a vitamin D deficiency. In fact, in the beginning, the doctor, and this is what a lot of people in the medical field do, and I don't want to speak for them, but they consider a univariate approach. You come in, you have a problem, they look at you and they say, oh, this is deficient, take this. And it's a very univariate. One means one variable, considering one variable. Oh, that variable looks like it's messed up, let's treat it. And there's some merit to that, because it works to an extent, especially if that variable is actually, governing everything. But in this particular situation, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's multivariate. It's multivariable. There are issues with trauma, potentially. There are issues with social anxiety. There are issues with mobility. There are issues with potentially depression. There's, things like that. And so the vitamin D deficiency isn't the problem. Okay. That variable that was identified by the physician is not the problem. And by the way, disclaimer, I'm not offering any medical advice. I'm just using this as an illustration for a point. But the vitamin D deficiency isn't the issue. The issue is a conglomerate of issues. It's a lifestyle issue. There's all kinds of other variables that need to be adjusted that actually impact the vitamin D, and the vitamin D is impacting the general state of affairs for that person's body so they feel better, right? And so a holistic method, I would say, more scientifically appropriate, the multivariate approach would be to look at all the variables, look at it and zoom out on a grand scale, and treat and offer solutions based on those variables. Would probably been the best bet for this person. Offering some kind of therapy, challenging them every day to open those blinds, challenging them to go on a walk every day, things like that. There's probably 5 or 7, 10 things that this person could do to improve the quality of their life. And it's not a vitamin D situation. The vitamin D situation is taken care of. So the point is this: there's a lot of problems that go unfixed because we take a univariate approach, and not a multivariate approach, not a zoomed out approach. And so this happens in ABA all the time, specifically with problem behaviors, where we oftentimes zoom in and look at antecedent interventions, but we need to zoom out and take a look at the bigger picture. Is there trauma in the child's background? Are there other ways? So main takeaway for today is to look at some of those problem behaviors with your kids, and to look at maybe even those skills that you're not seeing an increase in. And don't try to come up with the answer. Try to come up with potential answers, multiple hypotheses. So often I see, BCBAs, and I think I'm going to speak on this a little bit in the future here, kind of becoming tied down to just 1 or 2 approaches. And because those are the only 2 approaches they have, they only see solutions for problems through a couple different variables. And you have to expand on that. And so you have to have the ability to look at a situation, look at a problem behavior, and say, okay, we're going to do some functional communication. We're also going to work on some reinforcer expansion. We're also going to work with the family at home to manage that potential reinforcer that person wants. There's a variety of different things you can do to improve the situation, because after all, at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of time with these kids. We can't sit there and try to go through every variable. It could take years and years and years to get to the bottom of something. And so we have to challenge ourselves to look at problem behavior, to look at a clinical problem, and get good at saying what a clinical problem is. So I have a child that I can't seem to teach them how to match things, for example. That's a clinical problem. Frame it the right way, and then come up with a list of hypotheses, come up with a list of scenarios, come up with a list of variables that might be impacting that, and try to mediate those variables, plural, those multiple variables, as opposed to, oh, this person is having a problem behavior. When I take away the iPad, it's functional communication. Let's teach a man. And that's it. There's all kinds of things that might be contributing to that learner having problem behaviors when you take away your iPad. And so there's got to be this approach of coming in from a zoomed out, looking at things from the beginning of that person's life to now, a zoomed out approach and a multivariate approach. And then once you consider all the variables, coming up with solutions for each of those variables, coming up with ways to manage those variables, whether that means removing the variables from the environment, teaching a man for the variables, teaching them to manage themselves around those variables, whatever it is. Look at your clinical problems and come up with multiple solutions, as opposed to just saying it's just this one thing. And sometimes it is just that one thing, and you should test it out and try to make that happen. But the approach, I'm trying to caution here you on is getting to a point where you make the assumption that every problem behavior is controlled by just one variable. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is as simple as a MAND and functional communication. But sometimes there's other things. And so looking at things comprehensively, making a list of the things that might be impacting that that learner's environment and their behavior, and then coming up with solutions for both of those, prescribing those solutions with your RBTs and the families, going after them and monitoring them. And sometimes a conglomerate of things fixes a conglomerate of variables. Multiple solutions fix multiple variables. And then as a result, you get a decrease in problem behavior, increase in skill acquisition. So that's my message for this week. Message me on this particular topic, because I challenge you to, because that's a little bit more philosophical and broad. I'm not giving you a specific example of like how to teach a kid how to wipe after using the restroom, or how to teach a kid to engage in more reinforcement. I'm pushing you in a more philosophical approach, and to guard against a common problem with behavior analysts. But reach out if you need further examples, and I'll try to include some in the blog as well, so that way you get an idea. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this topic in the coming weeks as well. So thanks a lot.